Greetings and welcome to the Equity.Guru Investor Roundtable. Today we're talking about pot. I don't know if we're going to smoke it or eat it or anything, but we're going to talk about it for sure right now. I'm Rob. Next to me in the basement is Galen.
Yep.
What are you making today? Don't tell me. Pot brownies.
Yes, but legal pot brownies.
Legal pot brownies. Chris Perry, who made a name for himself talking about pot as the guru himself in the far corner, who's going to start us off momentarily, and Vishal upstairs will talk about the charts. Interesting world, the pot world these days, or not. But we did have a reporting day for one of the companies that we're talking about, Organigram. It is Tuesday, April 12th, and they went up 10% today. We'll get into that. Derek West out of Moncton is there. That would be in New Brunswick. Moncton, it's OGI on the Toronto Exchange. We're going to talk about them. We're also going to talk about the sector with Seoul Global Investments, which is SOL on the Canadian Exchange, Andrew DeFrancisco out of Toronto. And also Matt Hawkins is an interim CEO out of Oakland, California for Habourside, HBOR on the Canadian Exchange. So those are the three that we have selected in this sector. Organigram is particularly of interest because, as I mentioned, they reported today. And Chris Perry is going to talk about pot. Chris Perry.
Well, I'm going to try and keep it sort of 30,000 square feet, 30,000 feet above the details here, because, so here's the thing with cannabis, right? You've got two kinds of people investing in cannabis right now. There's the enthusiasts who think that by investing in cannabis, they're supporting the industry. And then you've got the vulture capitalists who see that the whole freaking sector is way overvalued, way overinvested, has been for years, and is on the way down, and shorts the damn thing all the way. There's very little in the middle. You don't have a whole lot of institutional investment right now because of regulatory issues in the US and the landscape in Canada just being completely blown out. So for mine, if you're going to invest in the cannabis space, you don't invest in the sector. You look for specific targets that may have already been beaten up enough that there might be something for you to get to. So today, Organigram put out some results. They lost $4 million in fiscal Q2. A little bit of action price-wise, they're up about 10%. That's great. But if you look at their share price over the last year, it's pretty shitty. It's been a downward swing for the whole way. If you go back 2 years, you see that there was a big bump in early 2021, and it's just been all downhill ever since. Basically, $8 on the top, down to $2 right now. So why would you invest in Organigram? Well, so here's the interesting story about OGI, and that is that they're looking to chip away at their business model, streamline a bit here and there, cut down some expenses here and there, and though they still lose money, they're actually moving things in the right direction in terms of if you were going to rehab a company, what they're doing is how you would do it, right? If you look at the actual sales, you've got about 43 million in gross revenue in Q2. So let's say 160 million over the course of the year. But when you look at what Organigram is actually valued at, $596 million market cap, you're looking at about 3-4 years of revenues to that share price. I don't know how long it's going to be to make a profit on this deal, or if they're just tightening it up so that it can be purchased by someone at some later time. But generally speaking, for me, the outlook for Canadian pot is pretty weak. Those people that are going to use it in its current form do. I don't think anyone is sitting on the sidelines who's been tempted. Other than bringing new products together or engaging the promise that's long been there, that is, we're going to take the good parts of cannabis and move them into biotech and medications and healthcare and insurance and old folks care. None of that seems to be really happening on any great stage. And when it does, it's probably going to be long enough in the future that we'll be bringing cheapo cannabis in from other places where it doesn't require the sort of rules that it does to grow in Canada. So does OGI have a 5-year outlook? where things will come good. Maybe they'll break even in that time, but will they be a $600 million company in doing so? I just don't think it's worth it. So even though the share price, the share chart shows a little bit of a bottoming out, I think if you go back, you'll find that it's bottomed out a bunch of times. And if you go back, over 5 years, we're seeing such a die-off right now that in order for things to just be justified market cap-wise, I think your revenues have to go up about 3 times from where they are. You've got to be showing an actual profit that you can build from, and OGI is just not there for me. If we move across to Habourside, a pretty similar sort of share chart. Looks like a bottoming out. Certainly it's come from a much higher place of $3 a couple of years ago, down to the 60 cents now. If you're just looking at 2022, however, some activity that's interesting there. Bit of an increase in volume, bit of an increase in share price, but it's heavy lifting, right? It's not that they're going to put out one piece of news and all of a sudden this thing's going to be taking off. It seems like people have lost money on it. People may continue to lose money for a little bit, but there's acquisitions in their news flow, right? And that's, I think, the interesting thing about cannabis right now is we're starting to see those that can raise money are going out and buying distressed assets. So Habourside is part of the Cresco Labs group. Cresco's reduced their stake in that a little bit. But while they're doing that, Habourside is increasing their stake in other things. So this sort of entwining of different groups, I think, is a really interesting thing as the laws in the US may liberalize a little bit. Beyond that, I think one interesting company for me is Seoul Global. Now, this isn't strictly a cannabis deal. They've got investments in a whole bunch of other things. They bought into Quest, a military software hardware stock that we've talked about a lot. They recently sold their stake there. They've bought into a whole bunch of other groups in other industries. This is more an investment fund for Andy DiFrancesco at this point. They've been into lithium. They're all over the place. So what I look at these guys as is market opportunists. Sol earned 159 million last year, but it was just buying in and out of different things. Now, if you go back into the cannabis history books, Andy DiFrancesco was one of the pivots in the rise of public company cannabis, right? He would go out, find things cheap, and bring them back to the public markets, sell them for 10 times what he paid for them, and the buyers would generally get a 3 or 4 times increase on their market cap on the news, until they didn't, and it all started coming undone, and companies like Afria had to start revealing, the bullshit that they were pulling. DiFrancesco, I'm not going to say that his trading record is spotless. I'm not going to say that he's the squeaky clean guy, but he makes money. And so Seoul Global is a way to basically bet on him finding deals that he will then get out of later at a higher rate. If you go into the share chart on Sol, it took a real beating earlier this year and got to a place where, while it had been a company that was 7 times the value of it where it is now it's a market cap scale. You're looking at about 69 million bucks. So considering they're earning 160 million in 2021, it's an interesting market cap. I'm not going to say that when you buy into this, you know what you're going to get into, because at any given day, DiFrancesco could go and buy a refrigerator company in Taiwan. But the thing to watch is, generally speaking, when he does that, there's money at the other side that he's already figured out. Lastly, I'm going to talk about Terrascend. So Terrascend is an interesting cat for me. $500 million company. A share chart that looks much like the others in that the last 6 months seem to have bottomed out a little bit. Now, you get a lot of guys online that talk about Terrascend and are like, it's coming, it's going to pop. It's not going to pop. If you look at the news flow, you see the same sort of stuff that you saw with the others. Lots of acquisitions, lots of new directors, a little bit of money coming in, but also earning money. So the $62 million that Terrascend earned back last November in Q3 is pretty good money. As they're acquiring other things, the actual month-to-month losses and profits are a little less important because they're really positioning themselves for later down the line. But I will say the numbers don't look terrible. You're not looking at massive losses as you are with some. You're looking at a company that seems to be allocating its cash in places that generate revenue. And as much as I don't believe that the US market is a day away from suddenly changing the rules and allowing everyone to bank their profits and allow Pfizer and Philip Morris to suddenly become big cannabis companies, the American companies do have a little less baggage than the Canadians do in terms of proving themselves out. They don't necessarily need to repay 5 times their value in loans like some Canadian companies do. So Terrascend of the bigger boys, I think, is interesting. But again, anything you go into in this space, go into knowing the rules of the card game ahead of time. You're not buying something that's going to generate a profit this quarter, maybe not next quarter, and maybe the rules of the game will change completely 3 or 4 times before that happens.
By the way, I didn't throw out Terrascend's basic profile. They're TER on the Canadian Exchange out of Mississauga, Ontario. And it's Jason Garrett is the executive chairman. So you got 4 different ones that Chris has been talking about. And Galen, you are not or are a pot investor.
I am not a pot investor. I did pot. I smoked pot for many years. In fact, probably could smoke Tommy Chong under the table. So I'm well familiar with the industry as it was then and as it is now. Now, my belief is that there really is no light at the end of this particular tunnel. We've completely overblown the industry, its ability to grow, and where it's actually going to head. I don't think there's going to be bright around the corner here. The U.S. bill, I'm going to talk on a very broad thing here. I'm not even going to talk about the companies. The U.S. legalization bill that got put through the House was merely a gesture to show that they care. It will die on the Senate floor. It won't make it federal law. They won't make it legal. It will not happen. Maybe in about 50 years. That's about what time it takes for these kinds of things to actually get passed through and accepted on a federal level, but certainly not now and not even within the next decade. So a lot of investors have been sort of, shall I say, suckered into believing that this is yet another push that's going to happen and make people rich. Unfortunately, this is more or less an indication of the meme investment philosophy that most investors have been taking over the last decade that has no idea of fundamentals or any kind of real potential. They're just suckered by Twitter. Thanks, Elon. Now, if for some real numbers, if you're looking at the Canadian market and you want to figure that things are going to be better soon, let's have some predictions here. Basically, Federico Gomes, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing either one of those correctly. He's an analyst, market analyst. His figure is that recreational cannabis market is going to grow at a compound annual growth rate of about 13.4% between 2021 and 2029, resulting in a sales in Canada of approximately $12.3 billion. Currently, I think it was about 4 right now of recreational cannabis within Canada. Now, if we take a look at the actual breakdown of numbers by the Canadian government, who have access to all these numbers, basically we have total inventory of package units of edible cannabis and cannabis extracts represents about 6.5 and 5.5 times total sales respectively. So even if we grow at 14 point something or other percent, there's still stuff going to be left in warehouses. We are not going to be picking that up. In terms of total inventory of package units of dry cannabis that's held by cultivators and distributors, it represents 3.7 total times. So you're going to maybe cut even in 10 years. So not a lot of growth here as far as we can see, as far as I can see. If you're thinking about this industry as something you're going to all of a sudden be a billionaire in 3 weeks or even 3 months or even 10 years down the road, probably not. You can do the long play if you like. There's some interesting aspects that they've discovered with the cannabis industry that's particular to it, and it has a lot to do with millennials and Generation Ys and whatever else happens down the pipe. So basically, it's all about craft. We love the craft beer. We like the specialty coffees. So if you're going to get involved in cannabis and you're going to want to go to producers or cultivators, you're really going to want to find out the people that are going to do the niche products, the guys that are doing the craft products. Because most likely, considering the crowd that's growing up, and it's not me because I'm on my way out, are going to be looking for designer. They don't want the stuff that's being made by the million pounds. They're looking for something that's kitsch, something that they can brag to their friends about on social media, something that they can pretend that they're a sommelier of weed. It's not going to be somebody that's just, I just want to get high. That's not your crowd anymore.
You're saying brand name here matters then?
Brand name will definitely matter in the long run. You're going to be looking for smaller growers. You're going to be looking for craft growers. That's the kind of people you're wanting to get involved in. So you're going to look for companies that accumulate those products. You're going to be looking for smaller markets. You're not going to be going for the huge MSOs. At least if you're going to try and make some growth with your money.
What about the growers, though? What would you say about that? I mean, if
the money's not in growing.
No?
The money's in the packaging and distribution.
I mean, if you look at something that's more of a mature industry along the same lines like coffee, Starbucks isn't growing coffee beans in Edmonton grow houses, right? Like you grow it where it's cheapest to grow it, and that is out of the third world. Cannabis is the same. Is the moment someone says, all right, let's allow imports, the entire Canadian business is gone. And the entire Canadian business will be too expensive to run while there's a cheaper option out there for the foreseeable future. You'd be better off turning the cannabis growers into bell pepper growers at this point. When it was first starting out and everyone was raising tens of millions of dollars, it mattered how much you were spending to build your grow house because it was a sign of glory.
Yep.
Now it's a weight around your neck, right? Honestly, we should be growing it in fields. We shouldn't be growing it indoors.
It's a very interesting thing. As legislation is changed and it becomes a little easier to cultivate this stuff, a lot of these companies' investments are going to go straight out the window. Realistically, this market was blown out and destroyed 3 months into it, and it will never recover. I mean, I can only guess and would assume, because, we're not all that different across the globe, that the Canadian market, in terms of use versus production, probably mirrors the American market. Yes, Maryland just decided it was going to make pot legal, and it's another one of the states that are doing it. But honestly, between what is being grown to be put on offer and what is actually being bought is a huge, huge difference. And it's going to be a long time, if ever, that it catches up to what's happening.
All right. Now, the one thing is, will there be any trends or any gimmicks or anything that happens that allows stock prices to move? And right now, we're saying no.
Not unless the Senate actually passes that bill, but there's a snowball's chance in hell of that.
Yeah, happening. Right now, if you put together an anti-lynching bill, it takes 5 years to get that through the US, right? Honestly, you could put together a bill that says, hey, nobody punch nuns in the face. And if the Democrats put it forward, the Republicans wouldn't vote for it, right? So the idea that suddenly someone's going to throw together a budget paper that, legalizes banking of cannabis profits federally, forget about it, man. It would be a good thing. It's a good thing, but Democrats will want to run on it. They're not going to want to just do it and not get any benefit out of the ballot box. Republicans are going to want to stop them, so they're going to put everything in their path. And the Democrats can't even get their own side voting for the same thing.
Exactly, yeah. So I was going to say, I think the Democrats own both the House and the Senate right now.
Barely.
The Senate barely. The House more so, but the Senate barely.
Yeah. So it says here, basically, the prospects for passing the bill in the Senate appear to be low because the Democrats would need all of their members and need 10 Republicans to overcome a 60-vote hurdle needed to advance to a final.
And Manchin never votes with the party.
No, and Sinema doesn't vote, and so it's a big honey dick, to want to use someone else's phrase, dangled in front of the cannabis investors. not to get them to buy more stock, but to get them to hold on to their stock even though it's sinking, right? Like we, Equity.Guru, we called the top of the cannabis market like 4 years ago to the day, and you can pull up the chart of the index funds since then, and it is just a straight line down. Occasionally you get a month or two where enough hype builds up. Hey, maybe the laws are going to change and things jump by 20 or 30%, and everyone says, here it comes. And we've said all the way along, nope, don't get suckered, and people still get suckered, right? Like prices are down 90% from that point, and people still try and catch the falling knife. So look, I think you can still make money in cannabis, but you've got to be really picky, right? Like I really liked Experian, which changed its name to Citizen Stash last year. Really good product, really good people, fighting their way up from like micro cap status inch by inch. They got bought up by Valens. I really liked Heritage Cannabis. They seem to be doing really good things, but you know the market just kind of swamped up around them, and now they can't get financials together. You know, I think that honestly, you've got to go in for surgical strikes. And the idea that one small company is going to raise itself above everybody else is kind of smoked before it begins, because let's say in the soft drink market, right? Everyone looks at Coke and Pepsi and says, so that's the formula. Someone's going to become the Coke and the Pepsi. It doesn't happen that way in cannabis, because you've got 400 different companies fighting for that market share. And there's no real
and the big players don't have the ability to accumulate all the small stuff.
They can't go and spend $100 million in marketing and just eat it all up, because the rules don't allow that in Canada. So you're really down to the big guys continually losing market share to a sea of little guys, none of whom can actually get enough of the market to start playing big boy tennis. Right. So, you know, personally, I've got my favorites. If I'm going to go out there, I'm going to go get some beverages, and I'm going to go and get some edibles, and I know which brands I'm going to go with. But if they're not there, then I'm just going to go and grab whatever else is cheap.
Right. It's tough to brand build when you're spread out.
It's funny because like Galen mentioned brands. Remember there was that a few months ago, we were talking about that cannabis company that looked like it was much more of a luxury company with the nice boutique shops and stuff. I'm trying to think of that name, but I wonder how they're doing now.
And that's the problem, is you're trying to think of the name.
Right. Well, in the meantime, Michelle, hit us with the charts, and maybe the one that's most interesting based on what Chris said is Organigram, because they went up 10%. Does that last? Does it hang? What do people do with that in the next few days or weeks?
So Organigram and Habourside had some big moves today. The day we're recording, Organigram was up 10%, whereas Habourside was up 7%. So the way I'm approaching this is, yes, there is that huge, the huge fundamental news, right? Like, is this bill ever going to pass? We've seen it, or the House passes the bill, but then the Senate always knocks it down. It's been a couple of times now, at least. And the market always gets excited, right? The cannabis space always gets excited whenever such news like this is coming down the road. I still have a lot of retail traders. They're not like big into markets as such, but they're buying up cannabis because they're thinking the U.S. government has to, legalize cannabis down the road. They're like, it just has to happen, man. Like, that's why I'm going into cannabis. So there are people, that I guess still believe that government can get things done.
As with the HOPE Act, they have a lot of hope.
You know what happens the day after it's legalized? Everything drops because it's already priced in, right?
Yeah.
In Canada, every time there was a big governmental move about to happen, the stock went up and up and up and up, and everyone was like, after it happens, it's going to go to the moon. On the news, it always dies. It's already factored into the price.
And if you take a look at the actual trend, meaning that there's so much being left on the shelves, that there's no way you're going to be able to make your money back.
Right. And then, you mentioned the meme guys, the meme crowd. So Sundial Growers, that was the big sort of meme stock that a lot of the Wall Street Bets guys and other retail traders are trading. It had a nice, let's measure this run. Basically, in early March, it had a nice 95% run. And now it's given pretty much more than half of that back. They have earnings actually coming up next week. But
so basically, the Wall Street Bets makers, because that's basically what happened, sheared the rest of their group.
Yeah. So this is the one, if you are into the whole meme crowd and stuff, right, you can take a look at Sundial Growers. Probably, not what you really want to look at. But the way I approach the cannabis space is, in terms of a market cycle, it looks cheap compared to a lot of stuff. However, now basically all the stock markets are falling, so that's not really going to help any sort of bottoming potential for cannabis if the overall markets are still weak. But we had some hope. I believe a few months ago when we were recording, or a few months ago, I thought there was gonna be a bottom. But then we had that geopolitical news, which basically brought the whole markets down and killed a lot of that momentum. And MSOS, the ETF for the U.S. side, it actually printed record lows in March. It looked really bad. We did recover, however, on March 18th, but no momentum after that, right? Just 2 weeks here of no price movement higher. That's usually a bad sign because if you do get a strong breakout, you don't want to see the stock basically range for 2 weeks after. It's not really a strong indicator that there's more bulls coming into the market. And we have actually closed back below that now. We've closed back below that support that we recovered. And there is real potential now that we can actually make new record lows here in the MSOS ETF on the US side. On the Canadian side, funnily enough, things actually look a bit more positive. I'm just saying a bit more positive. Obviously, we still have to get that trigger, but HMMJ is the Canadian marijuana ETF that I'm watching here. And potential of like an inverse head and shoulder pattern here. However, we have to actually close above $6. We're at $5.29. So as a trader, as a reversal trader, as a long-term reversal trader, you don't really buy in right now because you have to wait for that breakout, which is above $6. And you're going to see this sort of structure on a lot of the charts that we're going to take a look at where, things are looking positive for a basing, but what's going to be that trigger, right? Is it, what's going to be that fundamental news? Is it going to be earnings or such? And we'll take a look again at the charts of Organigram because they've just released earnings. We can see where they're at in terms of the structure. Or is it going to be this overall recovery in the stock markets, which is going to bring back money into, I guess, some of these spaces that have been beat up for now? But, that's the big question going forward. So if we take a look at a few of these charts, Seoul Global, as Chris mentioned, had a huge breakdown near the end of the year of 2021 in December, and we closed below $3.25. It was all downhill from then. And Chris mentioned they're not just a cannabis company; they are also investing in esports, electric mobility, health, and wellness. So they're, it's not just pure cannabis. So you get a bit of everything. And as Chris said, you are betting on the manager there. Recently, we've closed below $1.37, which was a support zone. I'm thinking, the next basically support is possibly $1, right? Which is a big sort of technical or psychological important zone. So Seoul Global could be heading down to $1 unless we can recover and climb back above 137. So this one for me is more of like a wait and see. And yeah, that's really all I can say about Seoul. Organigram, very similar to the HMMJ chart that I just took a look at. Same sort of structure there with that inverse possible head and shoulder pattern.
Is that because it's actually the HMMJ?
It probably is, right?
Kind of like
probably,
Tesla and the S&P?
Probably huge, probably makes up a big component of it. But, similar approach, we just need to wait for that breakout. So we did have a nice gap up and 10% pop today. But you can sort of see how we are actually still just touching my long-term downtrend line. So, you can use these downtrend lines to sort of draw your slope, basically just, see with your own eyes what the trend is right now. And it's still, a downtrend, right? We can't argue against that, but there is a potential where we could be bottoming. And really, again, to wait and see to get above $2.30 here for Organigram to start a new uptrend for this company in particular. Habourside, very interesting. And Chris mentioned, that it did look like it was bottoming. We had some nice volume, and the all-time lows is at 30 cents, and we formed a beautiful, actually looking double bottom pattern here. I mean, this is sort of a textbook example, and in trading, you don't really get too many textbook examples, right? Things are always a bit dirty, but this is a perfect double bottom. You know, it looks like a W shape, which is what you want to see for a double bottom, especially at the bottom of a downtrend. And again, the trigger is actually that breakout, because you can sort of see here where we also had what you could argue was a double bottom, but there was no breakout of that neckline to initiate the reversal. However, for Habourside, we did get that breakout here on February 4th. And since then, you know, there was a bit of momentum taking the stock higher, but ever since, what day was this? Ever since, mid-February, when we hit 81 cents, the stock has now developed basically in a range between 81.5 cents here to the upside, and then the neckline at 56 cents there to the bottom side. And we did recently, actually on April 7th, test the bottom side, and you could see here indicated by this wick, there actually are buyers stepping in here and coming in quite strongly, buying, you know, the price, buying the stock when it dipped below this neckline and forcing the close back above. So something like that is usually, you know, what you want to see. So I would say, you know, as a technical trader, as a trade, Habourside might be the better one to look at, just because it has had that breakout confirmation, and you know that there's a wall of buyers defending this support zone. But again, the trigger is going to be that close above 81.5 cents, and that can maybe get the stock actually moving. But if it doesn't do that, you know, the stock can continue to range, right? Because it has basically ranged now for almost 2 months here. So that's something you have to take account of. You know, if you are more long-term, you can wait for that, be patient. But if you are maybe swing trading this, you might want to just wait for that breakout rather than keeping your money in a stock that's just going to range for who knows how long. And then finally, Terrascend. Again, you know, very interesting basing pattern, right? We've had this triple bottom range, you know, support test here around $6 Canadian. You can see here November 2021 was the first time we bounced around $6. We came back at the beginning of the year in late January of 2022. We bounced above at that level, and then just recently in mid-March of 2022, we retested $6 and we bounced above that level. So it is stuck within a range here, again, $6 to the bottom, and then up here you can see $7.50, and the stock just struggles to break above it. You can see there's chunks of ranges now just basically at $7.50. It just can never develop nice momentum to get the stock above that level. So if you are, you know, a trader or maybe even a long-term investor, you do want to watch this $7 and around 60 cent zone here for that breakout. But you know, yeah, from a technical approach, a lot of the cannabis, as Chris and Galen have mentioned, do look beat up. But the thing is, you need that catalyst to get them going, or in a trader's case, you need that technical breakout, which we don't have right now. So the best I can say is potential of a bottom. Some of these stocks are ranging, but you never know, right? We still need that breakout. And right now, I mean, the stock could continue to range, right? All these stocks can continue to range and frustrate the cannabis investors in general.
So I'm wondering at this point, we usually offer up $7,500 a person to spend responsibly, Galen. And I'm curious if there's any scenario that in the next, let's say, you know, this week, that you spend a penny on anything that we have aforementioned, Mr. Perry.
Well, look, a couple of these companies are former clients of ours, Habourside being one. I think of the group, I like that chart more than the others. I do worry that Cresco sort of freed themselves of some of their stock. I wonder what the motivation for that was, but that happened, and the company still manages to hold a base is interesting to me. We've also been related to Seoul Global a couple of years back when it was really on the boom. I think that of the group, that'd be the one that the gambler in me would probably be most inclined to throw a couple of grand at. Just for the shits and giggles more than anything. I think that what it holds, for what it holds, its market cap is reasonable. And I know that Mr. DiFrancesco is a player. So if there is an upward swing in cannabis, I would expect him to be at the middle of it when and if it happens. But that said, I'm not compelled to think that is going to happen anytime in the next few weeks to months.
Right.
And now I'm going to go on mute because the dickhead next door to me has a
Cutting
little.
grass.
So it's $0?
Is that $0? $0?
Is it a couple of grand in
Yes,
Seoul?
that's a 0.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Couple grand in
0 and
Seoul?
leaves blown.
No couple
Gotcha.
grand in Seoul? Or no? No.
I mean, no, there's probably other opportunities right now. I want to watch and see how it levels off.
Yeah.
It's down significantly in the last month, and I want to see if Andy D goes in and starts shoring it up himself.
Right.
Right. He's either a bad guitarist or a really good dentist. All right, Galen, any money out of my pocket for you?
Well, I'll take your cash,
Well,
and
if you take
I'll
the
throw
cash,
a really big party for myself.
now we're going to the
I
Caribbean.
I
We're
will.
taking
Yeah,
five
exactly.
girls.
Well, okay,
Taking
sure. I'll do
five
that.
women. We're
I'll-
taking
I'll-
me, you, and 5 girls.
I don't think we could do that on 7,500. But anyway, I would like to say that I would not spend a dime at this point in time on the cannabis industry, and not even in the near future, decades from now. I'm not inclined to be surgical in terms of investment. It's not that they're bad companies, but as I said, I think the industry itself had been destroyed 3 months into it, and I don't think it'll ever recover. I would much rather find other places to put my cash at this point. So
Yeah.
0 for me, my friend.
All right, that's 2 zippity doos. Michelle, are you going cuckoo at all?
I'm gonna, keep the cash in my pocket for now. As I said, if we do get those breakouts, that's the trigger for me. And I say that just because, the cannabis markets have been really, really frustrating, right? There's been so many times where it looks like we're bottoming, we're creating a range. We get that breakout sometimes, but the day after or 2 days later, the breakout just stalls and we sell off and it becomes a false breakout. So it is a bit frustrating. And I would just say, as a trader, wait until you get those technical breakouts. I do agree with Chris, though. I think Habourside, if there was one to consider, I think Habourside is the one that looks the best out of the bunch here in terms of a technical setup. What I would be looking at for the long term is I would be looking at some of these cannabis companies that have a bit of an agricultural sort of touch to them as well, right? Maybe, the village farms or an Agrify where they're using indoor farming technology, where they have their indoor farming pods in terms of Agrify. They use that to maybe grow cannabis, but as Chris said, you can easily switch that to bell peppers and other kind of stuff. So I would be looking at some of those type of plays for like a longer term play. But as of now, if I was looking at this bunch here, Habourside looks okay, but I would still just wait for that breakout on all of these because, as I said, been quite frustrating. So I'm just going to sit on the sidelines for now and wait for the technical breakouts.
All right, there we have it. I think that's 2 straight days, different sectors where we have gone zilch, which is okay. Sometimes
You got to do a gold show now,
It just happens. Yeah, I know. We got to get into a gold show.
But it's important to register the zilches because there are people who get suckered into that industry. They do a lot of weed themselves. They think it's going to be great that everyone out there is going to spend $1,000 a month on weed going forward, and it's just not it. The black market still persists, and the next generation, they're not weed heads, right? There's other options for them. They're not necessarily buying booze either, right? There's psychedelics and there's other things that they can get that they're into. I know that when weed legalized, I and all my friends started turning up at barbecues with edibles instead of bottles of wine, right?
Yep.
And we're all like, this is great. Everyone's going to get into it. But there's only so much you get into it because you've got to go to work the next day, right? You've got to still exist as a human being. You're not going to walk around in a weed haze. And the promise of medical weed working its way into the average everyday lives hasn't happened because everyone's too worried about getting fucking shatter on the shelves. So no one's developed the business beyond the enthusiasts. That's been the real problem. There's potential there. If you could get CBD in Wonder Bread, great. If you could get a supplement next to the Flintstone vitamins in the Shoppers Drug Mart, oh, great. But you can't. And so it's not a real business yet. It's just chunking into the black market. And every inch that you get into that space, the black market pushes back. Until we've got psychedelics being a real thing, a real legal, okay thing, This whole space, the whole sin space, the money's going to go to gambling before it's going to go to weed.
Yeah, the black market basically sells on par or even less at higher quality. Still,
All right. Well, for folks that
And you
are,
can open the package.
I know opening the package is a bitch. Terrascend is TER in the Canadian Exchange out of Mississauga, Ontario, under Jason Garrett. Matt Hawkins is the interim CEO for HBOR. That's Habourside in Oakland, California. That's in the Canadian Exchange's HBOR. Organigram, who we talked about, went up 10% today, is Derek West out of Moncton, New Brunswick, and that is OGI on the Toronto Exchange. And we've also talked about SOL, SOL, as in El Sol, the sunny man. That's Seoul Global Investments, Andrew DeFrancisco on the Canadian Exchange, SOL, out of Toronto. We can't guarantee any results, people. Not that we were really pumping any tires here or anything, but you might want to do a little homework on your own and check it out and see what you want to do. We can't guarantee anything, and we can't guarantee past performance will move along future results. That's it for the pot. I'm sure we will be talking about resources as in gold and also probably some psychedelics in the not so distant future. But until then, for Galen in the basement, who's making pot brownies, and for Chris up in the far corner who might be eating them, and Michelle directly above us, who's got a cocktail party starting in 5 minutes, I'm Rob. We'll see you next time on the Equity Guru Investor Roundtable.
bye.